Hello and good morning. Today I have a request from Mr. Bob Cramhole, who wanted to see a team of Terror Knights, specifically offensively themed Terror Knights, which is basically all Terror Knights really, going against a team of defensive warrior types. So, went ahead and set that up. So, here's a Danger Zone from before, from the very first fight. And over here we have the Knights of Cram as he requested. Essentially similar idea to before, wherein we have essentially 4 squads of 3, all with different setups. So we have one squad here with a claw, shield, and evasion setup, with a slight deviation from the evasion theme with their Crucible Greaves, which essentially just give them more resistance to spells of different varieties. We have the one-handed spear variants that he was asking for, made specifically for deflection, which won't specifically come into play in this fight, but it might come into play in future fights. But still, it gives them a good bit of tankiness. They're basically there to just poke. The next one are the axe variants, set up entirely for damage and damage absorption, as well as escutcheons for their stun smack. And over here we have the last ones, which are the katana and parrying dagger ones. These are the ones that went for full evasion. As you can see, there's a evasion difference of about 70 between these two. So these ones are going to be evading quite a bit. So he wanted to see the different defensive setups. Those are a few of them. Obviously you can mix and match a lot of that, but in my opinion, those are the 4 that I personally like. So we'll go for that. So we got max evasion, mixed evasion, just kind of tanking and poking, and essentially just tankiness, debuffs, and damage. So let's see how this goes. So they're going to be defending this castle. Looks like they're just going to get into a little bit of a formation in the front here. Hopefully they won't end up charging. Now all of their AIs are set to Vanguard, as are all of the ones for the Terror Knights, I believe. So we'll see how this goes. This should be pretty much the ideal setup for the soldiers. I know they're technically warriors. I started this series with KOL, so I really like to call them soldiers, because that's what they were called in that one. That's what their build seems to indicate, but anyhow. Technically speaking, as far as knights went, even though there's 2 different classes that say knights, there's still a very good possibility there could have been knights coming out looking like this. Technically speaking, a knight was just a guy that was more or less serving a particular lord there, and was given a higher rank. They weren't always necessarily rich, but a lot of them were. Actually fun to read about the numbers that get exchanged there, because man, some of them were crazy rich. Like just full suit of plate and all that apparently was the equivalent of more or less buying yourself a tank, which is fitting, all things considered. Now, obviously, because of their very, very, very large evasion bonus, the soldiers have a pretty big advantage against the Terror Knights. They're not the most accurate class, and their weapons aren't the most accurate, but they have a whole lot of abilities to make up for that. They won't be able to use things that they usually use to counter defensive units, like, for example, turning around rampart auras, or, well, they were rampart auras, but phalanxes, so they can't blow those up. Fear will be pretty effective, because it'll mess with their stats. Fearful Impact will be very effective, because it'll just get around their evasion entirely. A lot of them do have very high parry in order to counter that, though. They've got a lot of debuffs. These soldier guards here don't exactly have anything to counter that, though. That's why one of them was given the option of defending them, but even still, even with the Crucible setup, they won't be avoiding the debuffs very well. They're just not exactly set up for it. In order to have complete evasion to a lot of their things, it would be a little bit of a tricky setup, because they would have to mix together high evasion and high resistance. From what I understand, it's a mix of evasion and resistance that ends up allowing you to avoid a lot of that stuff. But even still, some of them have accuracy so high that they're probably not going to miss anyway. This is mostly because a lot of debuff units don't necessarily have a whole lot of int going for them, so, you know, they had to actually be made usable. If you were wondering, that's actually why Terror Knights sucked in base game. It's basically the thing that they were looking at those stats and like, oh, we gotta make these balanced for casters, and then they made TKs, and they looked at them and they're like, well, I guess we're just gonna be okay with 1 to 0% accuracy on all of these for some reason. So it was less than ideal. Now, personally, I think the guards are gonna win this without question, but I could be very well proven wrong here. Just because, again, parry, high evasion, plus vigorous on everyone. They're all gonna have dodge and true strike. Just punch that one straight off a wall. Nice. So we're going to see a lot of vigorous attack. I apologize if you don't like that effect. Such is life. Yeah, that low accuracy is definitely going to be the decider here. So we'll see how they do against other things. Actually, after this, there were a few other requests that were relatively similar just to see how certain classes did against other things. For example, the next one was to see how fairies did against dragons and things like that, but it's making me wonder how these soldier units would do against dragons. I would assume they would be able to parry everything, but they're relatively low damage for this setup. Probably means they would have a really hard time actually taking them down. So, a quick note on the way that the armor system's set up in One Vision at the moment. Basically, most one-handed weapons will have a really hard time getting through armor. Most of these TKs have mid to heavy armor. If you're wondering how they're classed up, there's differences. He calls them cloth, medium, and heavy, I think, something like that. But they're basically, you got your light stuff that's basically clothes, that's your robes, your leather, that kind of thing. Leather is technically classed as an evasion armor, but I like to class it as that anyway. So you've got some that are very light, that almost everyone can wear. You've got your mid-range stuff. This is mostly your light mail, your vests, that sort of thing. See, there we go. There's terrifying impact putting in work. But yeah, you got all those kinds of things. You have... What am I thinking of here? Yeah, so you've got your evasive vests, then you've got your middle-of-the-line armor. So those are the vests that are made less for evasion and more for armor, so they're just the side-graded versions. With plate legs, for example, the basic ones will help to evade better, the medium ones will allow to resist and defend better. And then you got your heavy stuff, which also breaks off into a couple categories, in which your full-on heavy armor is just there to give you health and defense, and just your beef incarnate. Whereas the side grade for that is one that actually gives you stronger attack. So you'll see a few of those coming up as well. For example, the axe builds on the soldiers here, they're using a dynamo plate, which is one example of that, where it's a side-graded armor that essentially just makes them stronger at the expense of health. Why am I getting more emails here? Yeah, more spam, okay. Endless spam always coming in, always wonderful. Probably when I go back and do my second wave on all these teams, I'm probably gonna maybe put Vigorous on only half of them, because that is getting a little bit annoying, not gonna lie. Okay, so there we go. They get frightened. That move, by the way, is a lot more likely to hit than it was in vanilla. So you actually have to worry about it. Actually, that's one of those interesting little changes from vanilla to this one. Because, like many things, I don't know, the Terranite was bizarrely underpowered in base game. I think I mentioned this before, but I've been doing, I like to do Iron Man runs. I post a fair few of them. I end up doing a lot of them. But I like to do them of random games every now and then. And so I've been doing one of base game kind of in the background there. That's not one that I ever plan to actually record doing an Iron Man run of, because it's so tedious. It's one of those things that you just, you can't sleep one day, so you're just doing that till 2 a.m. It's one of those. So, Lament of the Dead, right? It's one of those ones that ends up scaling up. I don't believe that actually still scales up anymore. I'd be wrong. I'm just going to interrupt to take a quick peek at their insides. That needs better phrasing, but you know what I mean. Let's look at their skills. Yeah, Lament of the Dead, no longer a ranked skill in One Vision. In base game it was, so you started off with something like I think like a 10% chance to actually have it do anything. Which, granted, once you got it all the way up there after using it a billion times, would end up going up to 80%, but still, most units that you ran into had 40 or 50, you had 10%, and unless you were spamming that to such an ungodly degree that you've got nothing else going on, you know, you weren't ranking that up really fast. And the only other opportunity would have been to basically recruit and then silver away some rando units from the wild. Just basically steal their skills, which, granted, people did in FFT. Actually, I think just FFT's system was a lot more natural. As weird as that is, like, oh, they exploded into a crystal. Somehow more natural than, like, I'm gonna kidnap this person, beat them to death 3 separate times, and then chuck a coin at them so that they teach their ghost skills to somebody else. Which I guess it's supposed to be like you're giving them their last rites, and maybe... I guess it's a reference to Roderick from the SNES version, because technically his ghost is around and he teaches all these cool skills that he knows to people. He was actually just changed into a crazy different guy for the remake, but either way, it was one of these things where, you know, it very well could be a reference. I think it makes sense. So, anyhow, moving on. What was I getting at here? Oh yeah, so, I guess that's, you know, what they were going for with that. Still, it would have been nice, you know, they just disappear on the spot, you train their skills to somebody, and then you move on. Because it's functionally the same thing, just from a different menu and a lot clunkier. And again, it did not make any sense in base game, just, you know, because it was like, your guy just died and you just farted over their skills to someone else. It seems to make a bit more in OV, and I know that seems strange, because functionally speaking, it's the same system, but... Ow, jeez. You ever have that thing where you drink too much coffee and then just suddenly have a weird pain in your side? That's not fun. So... Oh man, that lady is in some dire straits down there. So, what I'm getting at here. So in OV, right, you end up losing units quite a bit more often. You're far more likely to lose them just because, you know, in general, when damage happens, it's way more punishing. It's just harder to get it to happen. So, for example, if one of your units gets surrounded, there's a good chance they're just boned. They probably won't RPG stats their way out of that one, you know, special character or not. So, well, I mean, I guess unless they're a class that's specialized for that, like the Swordmaster. But okay. So you end up losing them more often, you have weapon skills that they trained up, you know. From a gameplay perspective, it makes more sense because you just don't want to raise another one, though you could. The time frame is reasonable. And I feel the reason that they included that system was simply because it was downright unreasonable to retrain somebody if they ended up passing away. But, you know, what can you do? Now, when I say unreasonable, I mean, like, let's say you train somebody up... let's say you were somebody that really, really wanted to use Draconology for some reason, and you trained that up over the course of several months. If that unit died, you were either reloading or you were never playing that game again, let's be honest. Whereas, you know, right now, if you have one of those skills on a unit, it might take a few fights, but they're going to get it to a reasonable rank eventually if they end up fighting that thing. I think he upped the rate to, like, let's see, I think base game was like 10 or something experience. I think it's now like up to 150 or 144, I think was the highest one. So they all just end up going up much, 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 much higher. Anatomies removed and all that sort of thing as of the last patch, so you get to see a lot more stuff. Man! They're getting all of those low percentage hits through. So an interesting thing to note, by the way, this kind of stuff is probably exactly why they ended up capping the miss rate to 75%. Just because if you had any higher than that, you would end up running into the Fire Emblem problem, which you would think Fire Emblem would have realized at some point. I mean, they've been around just as long, if not longer. I actually don't know if March of the Black Queen or Fire Emblem came first. I want to say Fire Emblem came first. But either way, so... You know, you'd think they would have realized at some point, like, we need a minimum hit percentage, you know? Like, 25% is an okay number. Actually, KOL had a similar thing where you could also potentially drop out your hit percentage, but that was only with units that were, like, so fast that they would clearly be able to be hit by something else. Like fairies, for example, ridiculously weak to casters, basically immune to melee units. Although, even then, they still ended up hitting a fair bit of the time. in the fairy run, even with maxed out fairies, with maxed out emblems, with maxed out weapons and everything, still managed to lose a guy, and I think I had several at low health at the end of the fight. And I think that guy ended up getting wiped out in like round 2 or something. But it was just kind of an unlucky fluke hit there. And all in all, they were kind of relying on their leader to hit the guy several times, so there's that. By their leader, I mean the fairies leader, who I made into this ungodly killing machine, who actually will be showing up in the Fairy vs. Dragon run, by the way. So, funny note, right? So fairies in the different games. Like, I never, I always thought that they were intentionally just there as a joke unit, but I guess they're entirely in all the games as just a Magikarp unit. As in, they suck in the beginning and then they're really good later. Like, it seems like the epitome of that. I've been going through March of the Black Queen lately, and was looking at the wiki when I was first told to go do that challenge run. I was looking it over. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, they've got two phases that they go through. You get them as fairies, then they turn into pixies, then they turn into selfs, and they're basically one of the best backline units in the game. And you just basically put all of them, like, to explain how that game works, you basically just have, like, I guess, like, 8 slots and up to 5 units, and you just, like, plop them all in there. Kind of like, what's it? You know how you have your setup thing for TO? Like the original SNES one, and then you just have all your slots there. Well, it's basically like that, except that is the entirety of that particular unit, and then you have like a crap ton of units just moving around in real time on a map. But okay, so they end up doing that, right? Everything is all well and good. Friggin' fairy units, all they can do is slap stuff in the front row. But then in the back, they go from just buffing stuff to buffing stuff twice as well and giving them a free turn, to eventually just, yeah, they just go and they hit every single other thing in the other party. I think it was either 2 or 3 times, with their whole missile thing that they get in all the games. Yeah, no, it's funny how often overlooked they are. Like, especially in the remake. I've heard a lot of people say that they were really bad in the remake, and they're even better in the remake. Like, I don't know how people forget about Virtuous Dance, considering that in Coda it's one of the scariest frickin' things you can run into. Especially, you know, when you run into Gremlin and fairy parties and everything. It is terrifying. Yeah, suddenly they just fly in, they're like, oh, you know, Coquettish Kiss and Virtuous Dance, just go ahead and pop those on everyone. Suddenly your entire party's fighting itself. I mean, granted, single shot from an archer will take them out, but still, you know, when there's like 8 of them in a party, what are you gonna do? You know what? There is a legit possibility that these TKs are winning this. Like, I will say, the guards are not doing a very good job of positioning themselves here. Here, let's take a quick look. I think it's because the guards are busy trying to keep themselves above half health, is the thing. Okay. Let's look here. Yeah, we've got 1 TK down. They're doing pretty darn well, all things considered. We've got 1 guy about to go down. For the guards... I mean, they're comparable, but they're definitely starting to fall apart here. And it's just terrifying impact that makes the difference. Yeah, terrifying impact on flanks. They're doing their job super well. Actually, out of curiosity, I ran that Knight versus TK fight again. Just kind of to see if it could go any other way. And yeah, actually, it absolutely could. And when I went and did it on the other map, the Knights ended up actually winning it. It was still really close. Like, I think they came down to, like, the last 2 units. The Knight of which was on crit, and then I think he, like, critted him off a wall or something. Either way. It was fun. They're close. The TKs are definitely good now. Like, I wouldn't say overpowered, because, frankly, they can still get overrun very easily, but they're strong. Like, really, it's just their limited recovery options that's their main weakness, which the AI doesn't really know how to exploit. I mean, they'll just keep going and healing one of their weaker units instead of getting a kill off. Especially if they have one that's at really high health, for example, and TK sees that and they're on low health, they're just going to go in, they're going to sap them, which I believe it's 15% of their health. So, you know, instead of the base game system, which was essentially whatever damage ability they have, which was, you know, none. So instead they would go in, they take a percentage of their health. So the higher health the unit has, the more they'll end up taking, meaning that they can potentially get 100 plus for themselves if under the right circumstances. Very handy. Alright. Also, I believe... No. I'm mistaken. I was gonna say I believe the TKs might have access to Field Alchemy too, but I think they're capped out at 1. Let me double check that. These should both be capped out at 1, I believe. Yeah, no. They both have 1. If you're wondering, with OV, there's actually half as many Field Alchemy skills because it made more sense that way. Oh, hello, telephone. Goodbye, telephone. So, again, if you're wondering how that works, so there's half as many Field Alchemy skills. Essentially, if... Let's see. In base game, if you had 1 or 2, you got access to seeds and you got access to a bunch of random debuffs. There was little to no rhyme or reason to the kind of stuff you were getting, you just got slightly more with each one, which works for MMOs and stuff. Didn't really work for this because you couldn't plan around it, because then you suddenly realized halfway through a fight, like, oh, well, I guess that guy doesn't know how to use a band-aid because he doesn't have 3 yet. And, you know, you thought 2 was enough, or you thought 3 was enough, or you thought 1 was enough, and it, honestly, even after like 8 years of playing the original, it still confuses me every single friggin' time. Granted, I'm not the smartest guy in the world by quite a very wide margin. In fact, people usually call me an idiot, but still, you know, it's notable. It's notable that for that long of a time, it still hasn't managed to be internalized. Alright, so this is getting a little bit closer here. Especially since, I don't know why it is on this map that those three Lady Knights over there just love to hang out on the right side. It's strange. Anyhow, so with One Vision, it's changed to 2 ranks instead. First rank gives you access to most of the stuff that you'll be using. So, for example, your seeds, most of your debuff items, and then the more complicated ones and everything else really comes in 2s. There are no orbs anymore. Orbs are simply a crafting material. So there's that as well. And yeah, good stuff. Good little change. Alright, I think I'm gonna have to leave this running for just a moment here. Yeah, text is automated. I need to go check on something, so one moment. Alrighty, and I'm back. Sorry for the delay there. Okay, so yeah, definitely seems like these TKs are winning. Let's see, we got 3 TKs down to... Actually, no! They're 4-4 right now because one of the TKs just retreated. Unless I'm missing one. Might be missing one here. Actually, let me count their numbers real quick here. And there goes another TK. There's another one of those guaranteed hits. Yeah, you just see the huge chunk of their life bar disappear every time they get one. Oh, crit him! Ah. That'd have been crazy if you got just, like, crit stunned off that cliff. I mean, obviously, terrain is going to play a part every now and then. Really, there's only one of the maps that seems perfectly suited for open fighting, and that'd be the Reason Way. Was it the Reason Way? No, I just mean that bridge, you know? You know the one where you fight all the dragons on, and it's the same one that you get Ozma's class marks on. What a weird, bizarre way to hide her class mark, by the way. So you get a unique character, you don't get any of her class marks with her, and then you have to be level 30 plus in order for certain bosses to drop them. So God forbid you change her out of her Knight Commander class, she can't become one again until you just find one on just like some rando unit. Man, another 25% kill there. So yeah, if you're unaware, if you never changed Ozma's class, like I did in base game, and then I could never figure out how to actually change her back. But okay, so the only way is to actually get another one of her class marks. Like I said, you gotta be level 30, and then you gotta fight one of the Knight Commander bosses. And there's a chance, I want to say like 25% or so, that they would end up dropping one. But again, that's only after you've already gone back at that higher level. And even that was kind of unconfirmed, because there were people saying that you specifically had to go back and you basically had to cherry it back to those particular fights in order for it to happen, that it straight up couldn't happen the first time. The only other way was to go to the map with the bridge on it, and there's a rare encounter that if you cause it to rain really badly, leave and then come back, there's a chance that there'll be 3 zombie Templars that spawn there, and you gotta steal it from one of them. Like, exercising doesn't do it, you specifically have to steal it. Actually, no, wait, I think somebody mentioned that they did get one from exercising. I was actually just trying it not too long ago, and I couldn't get one to drop. Although, to be fair, I kept redoing that same encounter over and over again, because again, Iron Man Run can't reload it. So I think from like 12 exorcisms, I didn't get anything. But when I ended up going and just using a guy to steal it, I got a couple of them. Which was kind of a pain, because, you know, base game thieves are very, very, very annoying to use. Especially with steel. Because, like, they have the durability of a paper plate, and then you try to go and get them to steal stuff from a bunch of heavily armored guys that love to hang around in a circle. Man. It's so weird comparing the two versions. So yeah, Rogues and OV, still pretty weak, but they do have the nice benefit of a lot of evasion options going for them, so if you set them up with like a buckler, a fist, if you're unaware, fist weapons are actually kind of like equipping a second shield in many ways. So if you get like a vest, some lightweight leggings, like a light shield, some like a fist weapon on them, maybe a seal of evasion or a ring of evasion or something like that, they are going to be dodging like a frickin' mosquito. It's pretty fantastic. So even if they're stunned, they'll still retain their dodge rating. All they really have to worry about is damage casters. So there's that. Alright, let's check what's going on in this pile of corpses. So we got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We've got 11 still on the field of both of them. So we can already count 1 loss for each. We got 5 losses for the guards. No, I'm an idiot. We got 7 losses for the guards, because I can't count apparently. And then we got 5 losses for the TKs. Still going pretty even. It's kind of interesting that they waited to use the Mending Seeds until now. Early on they kept using leaves over and over. And I guess they were just burning through their weakest items or something. So they won't have access to salves. Those are a half heal. They won't be doing that anytime soon. It definitely feels like those use abilities, the active abilities, are the ones that are making the difference here. Seems like the guards have to spend a lot of time getting rid of them. You were not being terribly careful. Granted, these kill moves, or not kill moves, but these death cry messages and stuff like that, they would have made... They're never gonna make sense. Some of them are so weirdly specific that it's kind of a wonder why they put them there. Although other ones, I wish they had done more with the references. Like, okay, so with the death messages, right? There's one of them that I absolutely love that's kind of annoying to me as well. That's, if a unit dies, like full dies, as in, like, they lost 2 of their other lives and proper dies, they have a chance to say, you know, I blame myself and God, which is, weirdly enough, a line that they removed from the War of the Lions remake. It's a line from the original FFT, so in that very first scene with Delita and Agrius. And he, like, basically goes and steals Avelia, he punches her in the gut, chucks her on the giant chicken. Agrius comes around like, no, stop. He's like, no, well, tough, blame yourself for God. I don't know, it still remains one of my favorite lines in all these games. Just like, you know, that's such a casual way of saying, you screwed up, I won, I'm sorry, that's just the situation. Oh man, the parry on these guards there, pretty amazing. I wonder if all of the ones with the parries are still standing. Let's see here. We've got 2 of... Yeah, those 2 are still standing, so let's see. Parries are doing well, and looks like maybe tanks are doing well? No, we've got 1 spear user, and then the parry guys are doing very well. Let's see, what builds are doing alright on the TK side? The axe builds for sure. Are all the axe builds still here? Yeah, all the axes are still here for the TKs, which I think were those 3 ladies that went off to the side, so they may have just not been exposed to damage. Yeah, I think the TKs are winning this. Sorry, Mr. Cramhole. By the way, I feel like a dick right now because I really should have mentioned earlier. So, Bob Cramhole, the guy that requested this, he's the... As far as I'm aware, the only other guy doing a run of One Vision at the moment. So yeah, he's pretty darn good. So he's fun to watch. Go check that out. Took him a few parts to get going with all the commentary and stuff like that. But now he's gotten to the point of, like, doing cram cam, as I like to call it. But yeah, doing, like, the whole face thing and all that. And, of course, Gatalio has to do his death taunt. Away to the copyright zone. Yeah, I wish some copyrighted things would not get into as much trouble as they do. Yeah, I think those, I'd be completely amazed if those two guys with the parrying daggers managed to pull this off. Actually, one of them just died. But that would have been hilarious if, like, one of them holed up in a corner or something and then just kept parrying over and over and beat everybody else. Come on, guards, or cram knights. You can do it. Actually, still can. 2 of the Terror Knights are disabled completely. Somehow, despite the crazy high evasion and the very high parry rating. Like, let's see. The last guy. How high did his parry get? Go check it out. So, if you're unaware from before, they get 32 times their normal experience during this fight. During these AI fights, so that they rank up their stuff faster, meaning that if somebody does something really well, they can potentially get it all the way up to max rank, but they were all the way up to 6. They had 3 naturally, and 3 from their equipment. So. But yeah, it looks like the TKs have this. And for those withers, that won't be very useful. Actually, this little project has made me very excited for potentially doing an AI run of the game at some point. Should be really fun. But I think after the IM run, maybe alongside the Griffin run, I'm gonna go ahead and try to do an AI run. I'd really love to figure out how all this AI stuff works. Man, these TKs, they're just like taking all those 25 and 40% and rolling with them like, no, this is good enough. Who needs accuracy? Which I guess it's kind of the same thing that applies to like games like Silent Storm and stuff like that. Like the hit still has to go somewhere. So they can't actually evade well enough to completely avoid everything that comes their way. And yeah, there we go. The TKs win it. So if you were ever curious to see defensive soldier units versus Terror Knights, looks like as long as the AI is involved, they kind of get a little bit crushed. There you go. Hope you had fun, and see you in the next one.